And in the very eerie silence. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight on this slightly less apocalyptic evening. We're so thrilled we could all be here tonight. We're also so delighted that the author of two of the most brilliant books that I've read recently, Marcus Kliewer, is also here in Winnipeg. And so we're thrilled to welcome him here to the store. He is, of course, here to discuss this new novel, The Caretaker. So huge thanks to Atria Books, Bestler Books, 1201 Books, and of course, Simon & Schuster Canada for coming together to publish this book and for making this evening a reality. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge, of course, that we are here in Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Innuit, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. I'm keenly aware that no one is here to listen to me, so I'll keep my comments very brief, but there will be a conversation that will take place to my left, and after that, there will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. So please do let those percolate over the course of the evening. When it comes time for questions, I'll approach you in a hopefully non-threatening manner with this handheld microphone, which just ensures that everyone here and watching online can hear your question as well. I'll be back at the end to go over signing procedure, but for right now, I have the great pleasure of introducing our host for the evening. Joanna Graham is a Winnipeg writer, reader, and avid tea drinker who has always been drawn to any piece of literature likely to make your skin crawl. She holds a master's degree in prose fiction from the University of East Anglia, was nominated for the John Hirsch Emerging Manitoba Writer Award in 2022, and recently served as juror for the 2026 Saskatchewan Book Awards. Her fiction has appeared in anthologies, chapbooks, and magazines, and as a bookseller here in McNally Robinson, she takes great pride in managing the horror section. Please join me in welcoming our own maestra of the macabre, Joanna Graham.
Thank you, John. I am thrilled to be introducing Marcus Kliewer tonight. Marcus Kliewer is a writer and stop-motion animator who lives in Vancouver, Canada. His debut novel, We Used to Live Here, began life as a serialized short story on Reddit, which was then acquired by Simon & Schuster even before it had been extended into a full-length novel. A review in Quill and Choir described Kliewer's sudden success as the horror fiction version of a Cinderella story. I personally first took notice of We Used to Live Here and its author shortly after the book was published because I was struggling to keep enough copies on our shelves to meet the steadily increasing demand. The bookstore and myself were more prepared for his second novel, though, The Caretaker, which we're here celebrating tonight. Maybe not psychologically prepared for the book's contents, but at least we had a good idea of how many cartons to order. It helped, of course, that the book was named the lead title for the Spring Booksellers list, and since its publication, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the hype has continued to grow. It has landed on numerous bestseller lists, including the Globe and Mail and the New York Times. And the more people read it, the clearer it becomes that all of this recognition is well-deserved. The Caretaker is a tense, multi-layered, impeccably crafted nightmare of a book, and I am so thrilled that Marcus Kliewer was able to join us in Winnipeg to discuss it tonight. Thank you so much, Marcus.
Thanks for having me.
So there are a lot of topics in this book, and we want to leave time for audience questions. So starting the discussion right away, the first thing, actually maybe many people are probably very familiar with the book already, but for those who haven't read it, would you mind giving us a quick description of the premise and what it's about?
Caretaker?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a down on her luck college grad struggling to pay rent, takes on the sketchiest house sitting job in the world, and supernatural mayhem ensues.
Yeah.
Or is it supernatural? Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. I do have to ask first, since you're a Canadian author making all sorts of Canadian headlines, why did you choose to set the novel in Oregon instead of, say, British Columbia?
It's kind of a bleak answer, and the answer is that it sucks to be poor anywhere in the world, and it sucks to be poor in Canada, but it sucks even more to be poor in the States when you don't have access to healthcare and all that. And so it was really that. It was just that, and then the Oregon. There's something about Oregon and its nature and its folklore that is just so unique and Vancouver and Washington are almost too pretty in a way.
Okay.
Oregon is beautiful, but there's also a menace to the nature there, especially at night.
Mhm.
And so like when I was trying to find a location, initially was thinking Vancouver, and then I was like, oh, well, the stakes aren't as high. Then I was thinking Washington, it was too pretty, and then I was driving down the road at night and I like hit Oregon and it was like the woods just changed, gnarled and droopy looking trees. So yeah, that was kind of the moment. I'm like, okay, it's gotta be Oregon, Oregon. Yeah,
Okay, fair enough. Well, we'll hope that some of your future novels are set in Canada.
they will be, yeah.
Excellent. So speaking of stakes and Macy's financial situation, as you mentioned, it's the sketchiest caretaking job in the world. There are red flags about the situation all over the place, but something I thought that you did very well throughout the book is show and then also kind of make the reader feel why Macy would take this job. A moment that resonated with me that I think illustrates her motivation very well is when she's remembering a particular shift working at a coffee shop. Trying not to give too much away, it's Macy's first shift back after experiencing a very painful loss, and she was only given 2 personal days to process this. This shift does not go well, and it ends up being a key moment in her descent into serious financial problems. Could you talk a bit about why you wanted to include this scene?
Well, my first job was Tim Hortons.
Okay.
And I think I must have been 14. How old would I have been, Dad? 15, 14, yeah. My dad's here from Kelowna, so super cool. But there was a specific moment where this guy, he says I must have the cream on his coffee, and I don't know where the truth lies, but even if I did, there's no reason to scream at a 14-year-old boy. And he was like, he looked ready to hit me. Like, he wasn't like screaming, but he looked ready to jump the counter and like, because he's like, I drove and then I took a sip and there was too much cream in it. And that was my first encounter with being on the receiving end of a customer like that. And so, yeah, and just I had so many interactions that kind of inspired that scene. I had somebody just blank point ask me if I was depressed once and I'm like, she's like, are you depressed? I'm like, I didn't think so. Like, I was 14, I didn't even think of that as a concept at the time. And so it's just like, it's a very you have some great interactions, but you also see the worst in people, and especially people when they view you as, it's like they're not even talking to you like you're a human sometimes. And
Yeah. I've had a history of customer service as well, and I'm unfortunately familiar with some of those interactions. So I mean, this scene was relatable, and when reading it, I felt like a much more reality-based sense of fear and dread than I was expecting going into this book. So I felt the risks of that situation and what happens to Macy afterwards, as well as the stakes associated with it. And so I felt I understood a little bit more why, okay, I do have to take this job, even though I know the warning signs.
Yeah.
So as part of the job, she's got to perform certain tasks in certain ways at certain times. And so this book is a wonderful example of rules horror, a horror story where you have to follow specific rules or something bad or catastrophic happens. What drew you to rules horror in general?
I think, No Sleep, so Reddit, where I kind of got my start, people almost roll their eyes because it's just every story on there was rules for a while. And now I'm seeing on TikTok, you're getting these, it's just list of rules things. And I think it was actually it was a story called My Wife and I Bought a Ranch, which was the story that initially sold to Netflix before mine, and a whole other story there, but it was kind of the one that like got me back into writing on No Sleep. And it was just like, it's so immediately hooks you because you kind of get a taste of what things are going to be, and then you want to see how they play out. And so I find it almost structures itself because it's kind of like you just go through each rule and that's the story. So and the story that kind of put me on the map was a rules story on Reddit that I was just kind of making up as I went along. I came up with a list of rules, and then I just would write a part every Tuesday and not knowing what the part would be the next week. But because it had those rules, I'd be like, okay, well, I need to explore this rule, and I need to do that one. And so, yeah, it's just fun, and I thought it was a good way to tie it into doing jobs, because it's like you have to do these tasks that you don't want to do, or they don't always make sense to you.
Yeah,
And-
that's a really clever connection. If you don't do them, there are consequences.
Exactly, yeah.
In one interview, you also said that horror was a perfect genre to explore mental health. Can you talk about how that worked in The Caretaker?
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of baked into the premise, because you're dealing with the most extremes of, you know, trauma, grief, and all these kind of things. And I find if you don't have some kind of heart to it, it can be too much. That's not to say there's some bleak horror that I like, and it's just bleak and disturbing, and that's kind of, you just watch it like it's like listening to an extreme death metal album or something, you know, just for that experience. But I find like the horror I gravitate to, it's like Mike Flanagan stuff, or it's something that has like an emotional core and a character to it. And yeah, horror just kind of like, it's like the perfect genre to explore that. I think watching, it was Jordan Peele's movie Get Out that like really kind of like blew my mind, because I'd always liked horror, but it was just kind of like, oh, this is like saying something, and this is like really like making me think about things I hadn't thought about before in a way that like other genres maybe couldn't quite do in the same way, at least. And so that really kind of inspired me as to what you can do with the genre.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's got amazing potential to put people in situations and sort of maybe show them how frightening it can be when you're going through that kind of a thing. So Macy regularly uses coping mechanisms to get her through stressful situations. She repeatedly sort of goes through the breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. She also has a couple of mantras or phrases she repeats. But in some ways, particularly in the first part of the book, it almost seems like these coping mechanisms are leading her to ignore warning signs. It's definitely not that simple. And later on, these techniques also help her keep going. But I'm curious as to your take on the relationship between those kind of coping strategies and the very kind of undeniable threats and stakes that Macy has to deal with.
It's always a balance with a book like this, because there was versions early on where it was going to be this much more kind of hyper vigilant, almost hyper competent, just very like, and that could have been a really, really interesting story, but that felt inauthentic to my own experiences with grief and my own experiences trying to work a job when you are dealing with depression or a loved one dying and all this kind of stuff. You do mess up. You have so much going on. And so it felt, I totally understand the frustration, because I am that person watching horror movies that screams at the screen, like, just open the door, turn off the stupid light. But every version that I tried where she wasn't that, it felt inauthentic to I guess my own experience, and then to what I was trying to say with the story. So that's that. She could have maybe succeeded a little bit more early on, but I mean, she does have some wins later on. So
Yeah.
it's a hard balance, and I'm not quite sure I struck it right, but I would have rather done what I did than gone the opposite way and it not feeling authentic to what I was trying to say, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think you struck the balance really, really well. You like coping mechanisms are not a fix-all. It's complicated, it's messy. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I think that you captured that really well. And I also kind of admired the way you subverted the expectations of both kind of the rules horror and Macy not being super successful right away, because the rights are laid out and I'm like, okay, so we're gonna have a period of this goes according to plan. But you didn't give us that period. Right away.
It was another thing, so it was like, we were going to have a sequence where she kind of does the lights things
Mhm.
right. And I think there's a good argument that we probably should have included it, but I'm always like, when I'm reading, I'm just very impatient, I have a horrible attention span, so I'm like, get to the scares kind of thing, for better or worse, and so some of it was just that, it was a pacing thing.
Mhm.
And then the other reason was that she just wasn't, I wouldn't even necessarily say she was failing out of incompetence, it was more just out of like, she truly didn't think this was real, and it would have felt, she's kind of like, I can mess up a couple and I'm still gonna get this bonus, it's fine, and it's like, this is obviously some delusional person.
Yeah.
So like, it would have felt, if I went too far in that other direction, it would have also felt inauthentic, to the sense of like, oh, she's taking this super seriously as if she believes it right away, because I think she's not that, her younger sister is that type of character, but she's not, and so that's the other, it was a big balance to strike, and that's something that's like, it's hard, because like I see that, I feel like there's a blind spot as horror authors where it's like, a character will see something crazy happen and then they kind of just hand wave it away, and I'm like, well, how can you justify what you just, like, how can you hand wave, just saw like a demon crawl through a vent and like, you're like, oh, I guess it was the lighting or something.
No, I'm just sleep deprived, it's fine.
Yeah,
Everything's
exactly.
fine.
So that's another struggle,
For sure.
that, yeah, it's always, sometimes it's impossible to know until it's out there and you have other people reading it, you know.
Well, there are so many strong opinions about horror that I can hear like both sides or all five sides of an argument. And I feel like that's in your head too, when writing, because the narrative seems very much to be in conversation with horror tropes, movies, and their audiences. I want to highlight the chapter called 7 Seconds, which is a particularly cruel chapter for anyone who hasn't read it, or for anyone who has, but it's brilliant. It's maybe my favorite example of what you sort of do with reader expectations and what the reader might be thinking. The house Macy is watching has Ring cameras, so when Macy is sort of double checking her work, she watches herself on camera through her phone. And I thought this was so well done. Not only is it incredibly eerie and atmospheric, you've put her in the position where she is watching herself in a horror film. Can you talk about how this chapter developed? Was that an idea you had going in, or did it kind of just unfold?
So this was actually, I wrote it as a short story before a novel, and the bones of the short story are very similar to how the novel plays out, and it was just kind of cracked open and new things added in to expand it, but that scene was always in it, and for me, it was kind of a way to acknowledge readers that would be frustrated, to be like, she's also seeing this and seeing herself not doing what she should have been doing, and then screaming at herself. So like I like advocating for those readers, because it's like, if they don't, even if you're watching like an apocalypse thing and people are having an argument and they're doing something like really dumb, and then you need to have at least a character be like, this is really stupid, guys, and if you don't have that, then you just start being like, okay, the writer's stupid, and so like, it's like, I know it's almost defensive in a way, it's like, I know, like it's stupid, but yeah, so, and it's just fun, because that's like a universal experience, is dreaming at a character.
Yeah, and you do that really well with Macy's sister as well, Gemma, and having her as one of Macy's internal voices yelling at her to, don't you dare go in the basement, or that kind of thing. It gets the reader on side and really, really immersed in the action as well, so that was great. It also kind of almost lends a sense of inevitability to the scene. Macy cannot stop the horror unfolding any more than, you know, the reader can, screaming from outside the book maybe. So that was really cool. I also noticed a relentless quality in many aspects of the narrative, which is funny, you were talking about not being bleak, and there's a ton of heart in this, but it also has a tendency to kind of push beyond expected scenarios or conclusions. So an example I thought of was the concept of surviving the night. So Macy experienced a harrowing night. And so then again, I was expecting maybe a breather, a period of relief, maybe even a denouement. But the sun comes up and immediately something else is triggered, and Macy has to keep going. And then you remember, right, it's a weekend gig, there's like another 36 hours she has to get through. Do you find yourself regularly sort of drawn to this relentless quality, or?
Yeah, I think there's something you want to have that, but you still need some spaces, like some breather.
Yeah.
And I think there's like a chunk in this book that I think it starts with a phone call and then it ends with somebody in the basement. I'll just say that without spoiling anything. And like that sequence, I'm really proud of, because it is like I worked really hard to just keep that building and building and building, and like I think for keeping that relentlessness too, it's like you kind of have to top each thing. Like it's, you got a dial and each number needs to be higher than the next one. Because like if you have your biggest scare too early or your most intense thing too early, then it feels anticlimactic to have something smaller right after that in this sequence. So I love relentlessness, but then I also think I love the counter as well, where it's I talk about this a lot. It's a filmmaker, Miyazaki. He does these incredible animated films, Spirited Away, like Oscar-winning, just beautiful films. And he, Howl's Moving Castle,
Absolutely.
And he talks about this concept called Ma, and it's I'm gonna butcher exactly what it means, but it's the space between claps. And so if you watch his movies, it's like, if you watch, like, I just saw Super Mario Galaxy with my niece and nephew, which was fun as heck, but like that movie is all clap. There's it's just go, like ADD to the max. But you watch a Miyazaki film and it's like, you'll have this in Howl's Moving Castle, there's this incredible sequence, it's all hand-drawn animation, they go up this long staircase and it's like the witch starts melting and then they get to the top. And they finally get to the top and there's this little dog character and it just walks in a little circle and then it blows and it has like bangs over its eyes and you see like the hair go up and then it goes down and then it just sits and then breathes. And like that is probably like a 3 to 4 second animation. That's like a day of work for one person to do that. And that's what he's talking about. It's those little moments of like breather room. So then when the clap happens, it's that much more impactful. But then sometimes it's fun to just have none of that. And I think it depends on the genre, it depends on the emotion of the chapter and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think if you don't have some of that breather space, it overwhelms the reader and almost nothing becomes scary. Like when I'm writing these stories and like when I've been doing a short story and we wanting to be selling it to like Hollywood or whatever, most of my notes from my agents are fantastic. Like they're great, but sometimes it'll be like, oh, you need something big happen right up front. And it's like, no, you need that quiet. Because if the first thing that happens is huge, you can do that for sure. But like if you're in a haunted house story and like it opens with the ghost jumping out of it's like, okay, we'll just leave the house. Like it needs to be something small. Yeah. So
makes sense. And again, I thought that was something you did really well. And I've heard so many times like, oh, you should start right in the middle of the action. So I could have seen a version of this book, I suppose, where, you know, Macy's showing up to start the caretaking gig right away. And she's dealing with the lights right away. But I think, as you were saying, like the space beforehand was so crucial in setting her up as a character and setting up the stakes and getting the reader on side with the entire situation. And there's ominous stuff as well leading up to actually the house. All these little moments that you've put in just to make sure we're never fully settled. So going on to the rights themselves, an idea I've come across numerous times is that if there is an element of madness in a story, whether that's a character or a setting or something, it needs to have its own cohesive and consistent logic, even if it's not apparent to the reader or the protagonist. Did you have a logic in mind when creating these rights and any reasoning as to why they may or may not work the way they do?
So there's kind of two dimensions of an answer to that. The one would be I've talked about it before, but it's a very thinly veiled metaphor for OCD,
Mhm.
and it's not literally OCD, but one of the kind of the points of OCD is how absurd and almost funny some of like not funny haha, but just it's absurd some of the kind of compulsions people can get in their heads, and so there is kind of a bizarre weirdness and disjointedness to the rights that is very intentional to mimic that experience of OCD. But for my own headcanon, I am very intentional. Usually it's like I come up with an image, I like that image, and then I will work backwards from that to come up with a lore, mythos, reason that I have written down that may or may not ever be revealed. And it's just kind of fun doing that. Like the quote I always talk about from Lord of the Rings was I'm gonna mess it up, but it's something about it's Gandalf talking and he says there's like things far older than Sauron, the bottom of the sea, like nameless things, and like even Sauron doesn't know what they are. And you never found out what those were. I don't think he even said in his like notes or appendices what those things were. And I just love that kind of stuff. So there's the unknown that I like to hold on to, but then there's also like, again, being authentic to, even if it is a metaphor for an OCD experience, still being authentic to what that experience is. Because if it was logical, that would be authentic to my experience with OCD. Obviously, and it's such a wildly varying disorder with so many different elements, but like, for a lot of people, it's like it's stuff that it's like, this isn't my particular compulsion. We have someone that'd be like, I like coughed and I think I made this person sick and I think they're gonna like spread a virus to the entire world now, and like I think I need to go find them to stop them from like, thankfully mine aren't that extreme, but that's something people have where it's just like completely goes off the rails very quickly.
So not the cleanliness or symmetry that is often.
Yeah, that's the other, yeah, it's a very I wouldn't say misrepresented because that is an OCD, it's just that's the one that we always hear about. And it's a very real one, but there's so much more to it. And that's why like I didn't even know I had it until recently because I always thought it was just the cleanliness, symmetry things was like, yeah.
Did you find that difficult to balance in the book, having OCD very present, but maybe not taking over the whole book as a one-to-one kind of battle against mental illness?
Yeah, I was very there were versions where OCD was named specifically, and I think the main reason I backed off of that was I didn't. What she's going through in the book, even though it has so many similarities and it's like, again, it's like so thinly veiled, it might as well be glass, like what the metaphor is. But I think the reason I kind of don't quite take that little leap over and say that it is literally OCD is because what she is dealing with is probably has a supernatural origin. I'm leaving some room for debate there, but like,
Yes.
and OCD is generally the compulsions and the paranoias that you have aren't real. But they could be, and that's kind of that's the whatever could happen probably will kind of paranoia of the disorder.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even in the early review copies, I didn't even have OCD in the initial kind of note from the author, and then I ended up putting it in because it was like there's so much of it in there, and I know some people. I don't have this, but I know there's some people with OCD can literally hear a compulsion and then start taking that one on. So I wanted to kind of at least give them some heads up to be like, hey, this is in the book. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's very, very considerate. You mentioned that you left some room for debate, and yes, you sure did. There are a lot of things that are left ambiguous in the novel. Snippets of prayers, the symbols, the larger implications of Macy's tasks, the people on the other end of the line. Did earlier drafts explain the scenario a little bit more? Or was it always kind of, this is just the world Macy's in and what she has to deal with?
It's always been that, and yeah, it's been Because that's pretty much universally has been the reaction, but I was actually quite surprised, like I really thought with this book, even more so than, because We Used to Live is a very strange ending, and so I was like, okay, this one's kind of for this one's for the people that hated We Used to Live Here and didn't like the unanswered things, and now I'm hearing that like those people are even more for, with some exceptions, there's been some people who, for some reason, they've just been exactly on whatever, they just picked up on every little breadcrumb that I put in there perfectly, they happen to be the right time, the right space,
Yeah.
and like, there's been a few people that are like, yeah, it made perfect, like, I totally. Obviously, there's stuff that you can't know where your prayers come from. You don't know what phone callers are.
Mhm.
Um,
My mind is spiraling with them here.
yes, I think it just ties back into that the nameless things. I just kind of take that and turn it up to 11, and it's really just comes from the stuff that I love, like with horror. Like my favorite horror is movies like Blair Witch Project or the first Paranormal Activity, or a movie that was hugely influential on me was Cloverfield
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
and like it's not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but that movie, for people who aren't familiar, it's a big monster attacks New York City found footage movie, and it was one of the first movies I saw where like you kind of, all these things that you're promised in a Halloween movie, you're promised to, you have a scientist that's gonna come in and he's gonna be like, this is what's going on, this is the monster from the theta dimension and it's here to get revenge because we killed its child or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you have the heroes kind of save the girl and get they find a rocket launcher and they end up being part of the big plan to take down the big monster. And this movie just had none of that. It was just human suffering and everybody dies and the monster wins. And you never find out where it came from. It's just these people that are such a small part of this world, and the world is just out there and it's so much bigger than them. And it's a thing that I learned when I went to film school, which was like when you're staging a shot and you have, let's say you're trying to convince people that you have a full gymnasium and you only have like 5 extras. You frame your shot, you don't put all your extras in the frame where you can see them, you put one off to here so you can only see their leg, you can put one here, then you put one, because you put them 5, you're like, oh, they just had 5 extras and they're putting them, but you keep all those pieces of them out of the frame, and I guess I just like that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very effective.
Sorry, one thing I will add is I do have reasons that, like I am even more so with We Used to Live Here now, just because of the insane fan reaction and people wanting to know. I think it's very important to, if I am doing those things, at least have an explanation or a connection in my head. I may or may not ever reveal it. Sometimes I have multiple ones and then I'm always open. I keep it modular because sometimes a better idea comes along in my own head, or sometimes somebody accuses me of genius that I've never even thought of. That happens a lot. So, but yeah, I think it's important to, you can go wild when you're creating, and then you still have to come in, and I feel like you should, at least, for me at least, I want to have reasons and intentionality behind those things. Yeah.
I feel like as a reader, you can kind of sense as well when the author has like a thought out method. And it maybe drives you crazy a little bit more because you're like, I know it's there. I don't know what it is, but I know it's there.
Yeah.
Versus reading a story where like, I think they're just throwing things at you. It kind of feels like the author has more faith in you as a reader, which is a good feeling and a compelling feeling as well. But yeah, I think it was very effective when to keep it so unknown because we're so close to Macy and what she's going through. So it feels kind of like this is her kind of insane story that's taking place in this world that just happens to be.
She's a very,
in this way.
even though the stakes are so high, she is a very small part of a much larger
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
As we are in real life, like we barely know anything about outside our solar system, so it's like that's.
Yeah, going back to the Gandalf quote, there are
Yes.
things that are older and we will never know.
Yeah.
And just kind of knowing that can make you feel small and frightened, and then, oh, wait a minute, I have to do these tasks to prevent something crashing down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so many layers of mind games that you put us all through in the best possible way. So one of the things that Actually, before I turn it over to audience questions, I will say that you've been doing a ton of work promoting the book, traveling to dozens of events, as well as doing podcasts and interviews. You've been very generous sharing your time and insights with all of us. Is there anything about the book or the experience of writing and releasing it that you haven't had a chance to talk about or mention as much as you would like?
I mean, I think just the process of like I'm a very private, introverted person, and like being in front of a, that's why I never look at the crowd because I'm like, I'm just talking to you, and even when it's audience Q&A, I'm talking to that one person. So it's been like a crazy level of, I guess, exposure therapy because I actually enjoy doing these events now, which like I never would have thought that about myself. So it's been like really interesting, I guess, and crazy experience that I'm still kind of feels dreamlike in a weird way, but yeah.
Well, I think we're all very, very grateful that you're taking the time and putting so much effort and making time to talk to all of us and take questions. Thank you so, so much. So I think, yeah, now is a good time to turn it over to the audience to, I've spoken enough.
It's always the first one that's
I know, it's like the teacher calling on the student.
Had to break the ice.
Yes.
First. So I have a few questions. Well, I guess my one main question is, so whenever Macy would get instruction from someone and said, okay, you have to write it down, she'd go write it down, she would make spelling errors. And I was just curious, is that something that you have in your mind, or is there some sort of reason for that?
I think without getting into too many spoilers, I think it would be just there was an urgency to her type of scrolling, and so I wanted to convey that. I did not put hidden messages in the typos as people on Reddit. Like I'm always have to be clear about that. Like I sign Morse code in the books and like I've messed it up a few times and then I'll see it on the subreddit to be like, I got this number instead of this one. And I'm like, sorry, it was a mistake. But yeah, I think it was just to convey that urgency and like it would just, you know, when you see people texting in movies and it's like perfect grammar and they like use the apostrophes and punctuate, it just feels wrong. Like that's not how most people text, especially if they're younger. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you so much.
I noticed the use of the rotary phone in both books, and that really piqued my interest if there was a reason you chose to do that, especially when a lot of your audience at this point probably has never even seen a rotary phone, not the use one.
Yeah, so first off, I just love the imagery. Like it's a trope in horror for good reason. It's just the way it rings, the way it looks, and it's just the way it dials, everything about it is just so textural and physical. And then it's kind of a nod to these video games called Alan Wake that every event I get somebody asking me if I played them. They happened twice in a row last time. So there's rotary phones in that, and I'm like, it was a game that I was pretty heavily influenced by. So it's kind of just a way to tip a hat to something that's impacted me. Yeah. But there's also like there's intentionality. There's definitely a connection. There's a reason why there's a rotary phone in Heather's house and why it's a rotary phone. There's a headcanon reason for it. So yeah.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of where exactly is this wire that's connected to this rotary phone going?
Yeah.
Where is it coming?
And why is it a rotary phone and not a cell phone? Yeah.
We Used to Live Here was my favorite book last year, and I love horror, but I find I don't really get super scared by horror, but that book scared me so bad. I had to put it down a couple times. I was saying to my friend, and you mentioned it already, that in The Caretaker, she literally gets nothing right. And I feel like it's been either a long time since I've read a book like that, where like, yeah, you expect them to get at least one or two things right, but she constantly fails. And I guess it's not a question, sorry, but it's more of like, thank you for writing that, and it just felt really, really real. And like, okay, yeah, you're reading a book that's fantasy, but sometimes things don't go right. So
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah, it's sort of what I was talking about earlier with yeah.
Yeah.
So just because it is so conspiracy laden or like so open to fan theories and that kind of thing. What does it feel like when people give you a big elaborate fan theory that is really, really wrong?
It's a good question. I think sometimes it's wrong and I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then other times I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I think even with this book, there was some theories going around, and maybe I went a bit too hard, because generally I really like to encourage debate and stuff, but when I find, and we used to live here, I guess there's an interpretation of that character at the end where people thought what was happening to her wasn't real, that I wasn't the biggest fan of, just because I'm not a fan of like, oh, it was all a dream, it was all a hallucination tropes. I think it can be done well, but I feel like it's already been done the best it's ever been done, and I don't really think there's anything new to do there. And I think interpreting We Used to Live Here personally, I'm not taking away from anyone's theories, like interpret it how you want, but for me at least, I feel like it just feels like a letdown if that's the twist, and it also doesn't really make sense, which kind of is the point, I guess, from that theory. But yeah, I think generally it's just very flattering that people are having theories at all, but there have been a few where it's not only is it wrong, but I'm also like, oh, I don't like that. So yeah, I'm still figuring out how to deal with that. Good question.
I just want to say, I'm also a Tim Hortons PTSD reader. At 15 and a half, I used to work at the one actually in this mall, so I totally understand like the insane sanity of people and customers. So I think your next book should be where you like lock customers in and you're giving them the choice to be like, what's your order? And like it's just like crazy that they have to drink. I think that therapeutic for all of us retail workers.
I'll send you the royalties.
But I just want to say I've been to so many McNally like interviews and stuff like this, book signings, and you're clearly like super passionate about what you do, and it's just kind of refreshing because I've been to a couple and it's very like the author doesn't really get into it, but I feel like this one you're just like you've been into it from the get-go. Like you were passionate about it. Like Cloverfield, I remember seeing that in like, you know, Blockbuster, and it was such a polarizing movie where like people loved it, people hated it. And like you were in that, and now you're making your own books. Like it must be so like rewarding that you're now like taking that step into the world itself. Anyways, yeah, I just want to say I'm very intrigued by this interview, and I just bigger fan now.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just say, just to add to that, like, for me, I think the fact that I came into this in my late 20s, now early 30s, is a good thing, because like I've spent 8 years, working different jobs, and so like I feel like if I came into this in my early 20s, I might be a piece of crap, like it's hard not to get an ego if it happens to you, like this backrooms kid who's incredibly talented, but I really hope he seems grounded from interviews, he seems very humble, but yeah, like that's insane, like he was 17, right? So I feel like I'm really glad that it happened to me now, when I'm like much more well adjusted and able to deal with the insanity of it all, but yeah.
Yeah, the book largely surrounds themes of like mental health. So I was wondering if you had like a specific like message in when you were writing it, or if you kind of just let everything sort of develop naturally and like its messaging just develop that way, I guess.
I generally don't like to think about theme too much when I'm writing. What I focus on is what is it something the character would do, or what's something the character would never do, and how can I get them to do that by the end of the story? And then theme almost always, because humans are so pattern seeking, it just almost always organically arises from that. So for me, the theme of Caretaker would be about like, if you have a society that doesn't help people in crisis, it will crumble. And that is an empirical, it doesn't matter if you're right, left, that's an empirical fact. Societies with extreme inequality, even the richer people are less happy. Like it's just not good. So you need to have something, you need to have some kind of social safety nets. So, and like I lived through that personally, where like the healthcare system in Canada and CERB during COVID is the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. If I didn't get on CERB, I would still be, working in stop motion animation, which is very hard to make a living in, or I'd be mowing lawns, which I actually love, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I definitely prefer writing books. But going back to the character thing, that decision, whatever decision or thing they do that they would have done at the beginning, it can be massive. It can be like Breaking Bad, it can be, it can be Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Darth Vader killing Emperor Palpatine. That's a huge thing. You never would have done that at the beginning. He's his right-hand man, he's his best ally, and then he ends up throwing him off the thing. Or it can be a really, really small thing. Like there's this movie called Paprika, where it's just buying a character buys a movie ticket. He was a young guy, he always wanted to make movies, and then it never worked out for him, so he stopped seeing movies. And the whole story I haven't seen the movie in a while, I just remember its ending really well, and sorry for the spoilers, but yeah, like it's just him going to buy a movie ticket. And he would never have done that at the beginning of the story. And just immediately, natural theme arises from that. And that kind of becomes my North Star. In this story, it's a very small thing as well. Like it happens later in the story, and I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, it's a small thing the character does. And, yeah.
What can we expect for your future books? Do you have any plans on keep on exploring the old houses universe, or?
Yeah, so I have an audio trilogy of short stories coming out in September. Get it on Libro FM, support your local bookstore. It's like the exact same price as Audible, you put in your bookstore, and then it gives them money. So like Jeff Bezos doesn't need another yacht, he's fine. About your bookstore, so get it on Libro. And I'm not allowed to say this, but it'll probably be out print in like a few years after it as well. But get it on audio. It sounds really good. I've just listened to it. It's gonna be Sosie Bacon is gonna be she was the lead in Smile One, so she's doing a story, and then we have some other really great voice actors doing the other ones. And then my next book will be, well, that trilogy, one story is not in the Old House universe. It's like an airplane story. It's very Sam Raimi vibes, early 2001s kind of red eye airplane thriller vibes. So that one is kind of wanted to go crazy with it and not be tied down by trying to ground it. And then the other two are both in this universe. And then my third book just got blown up by Backrooms. So I just saw Backrooms, and I'm kind of like bowing out of liminal space a little bit because it just did so much imagery. And liminal space has been around forever, but it's like I kind of want to. It's so huge now that if I release it, people are just gonna be like, "Oh, you just watched Backrooms and wanted to do that." So, but yeah, I got something cooking that I'm excited about that it takes place in this universe. So I'll say that.
Hi there, I have kind of a two-parter. So when I first read We Used to Live Here, I was thrilled by the Morse code. I found it so thrilling to pull up the Morse code and figure it out and then add it all. Was that ever something that you considered continuing on, or did you not want to become the Morse code guy?
I'm happy to be the Morse code guy. It's on my signature. There's a bit of Morse code in Caretaker too, hidden. So I'd say hidden on the outside of the book somewhere there might be Morse code. But yeah, so it started on Reddit, and I would at the end of each story I would put a single word in Morse code, and if it was a series, I would do one word. And I noticed that like 90% of my comments was just people talking about that. And so from like a cynical business mind, like driving the algorithm perspective, I was like, wow, this is driving crazy engagement, and it's just fun. So
Yeah, and with that being said, I talked to many people who had also read the book who completely didn't pick up on the Morse code, which then led to them having to do a second read. So with the Caretaker, is there anything that on a subsequent read we should pay more attention to that we might miss the first time around?
I think there's a lot more hints as to what is going on with the ending than people like for me, it was always very clear, but the readers have told me, well, if it's about a coin toss, let's see who thinks it's clear or not. But there's a lot more breadcrumbs and I put in a lot more things in there to like really make that make sense. And then I think there's a decision that the main character makes near the end that a lot of people think was a failure, but it was her choice to make it and it wasn't a failure. So yeah, I would say that. And then also I can tell you this now. So there's these two there's a switchblade and there's initials carved into them. And I like hyper zoomed in and put Morse code on it. And the ink bleeds it out. So it's like it was gonna be something you would have needed like a borderline microscope to see. So I'm gonna find what I wrote on it and just probably post it on my Instagram at some point. It might be visible in like an ebook, but yeah. I think most of the other secrets have been discovered. There's nothing too crazy, but yeah. I said there was somebody in the back corner I think we missed, yeah.
Good spot.
Hi, I just want to say two things. One, I run a horror book club, and the first book that we read was We Used to Live Here. And that was probably the most intense meeting that we had after. It's like 2 hours long and there was a lot of discussion and it was really great. Second of all, do you have any plans to do anything else in the horror genre, or are you just going to stay primarily in more psychological horror?
Oh, like you're talking genre wise, like other types of horror I would write. Yeah, I I love fantasy, like I'm a big Tolkien nerd, thanks to my dad right in front of you there. Yeah, he read it to me when I was a kid. So I would love to do kind of dark fantasy horror. I just started reading the Between Two Fires book that everyone's talking about, and it kind of like just really, I just love kind of crazy surreal imagery and that kind of stuff. Or the Dark Tower series, for example, where it's like it just blends so well into that universe. So I would really love to do something in that genre. And then I would love to do like noir. I love like old black and white, like Maltese Falcon. I think it's just such a fascinating genre, and I'm sure there's fantastic books that have blended it with horror. Obviously, True Detective is a show that did it really well, but that would be really fun to explore. And then aliens, I want to do an aliens. UFOs are like genuinely really scary to me, so I think that would be fun to explore.
Hi there.
Hi.
I listened to the audiobook of We Used to Live Here, and kind of to tack on to the Morse quote thing, I found the environmental descriptions, or the audio of the environmental descriptions very compelling. I was wondering, when you're writing The Caretaker or any other stories you write, do you think about what the characters hear, or like audio cues like that while you're writing?
I think like that was one of the things I hear a lot, is like incorporating the five senses as much as possible, because it's really like there's really no other medium that can do taste or smell, for example. And for me, sound is like one of the most effective in horror, because it's just like the thing I was talking about is a snapping branch in the woods is a very primal reaction to that. If you're in the woods at night and you hear a branch snapping, and immediately your brain, especially if it's two branches snapping or three in a row and it sounds like footsteps, now your brain is like, what is causing those footsteps? And it will not rest until it kind of has, unless you're very experienced in the woods and you're kind of, it's probably, but most people, if they're not used to being in the woods, will want to kind of know what that is. And the other thing that's so great about sound is you can't see it. I think sight is one that I'm always careful with, because once you show too much, the classic Jaws conundrum, there's very few exceptions to that rule of like finally showing the monster makes it more scary, or at least more interesting. And yeah, so sound is just so great. Like I just saw this video of these hikers in the woods, and they're they're in their tent and then they hear something rush their tent and it does like a little Joker laugh. And it was a boar, but like they didn't know that. And like you just imagine you're in the woods in the middle of nowhere and hearing something and having that cover of the tent. So yeah, it's just a great sense to explore.
Yeah, in the Caretaker, you did a very effective sound notation for the lights every time. Like I was, like my eyes were twitching when I sort of saw that coming up. Yeah.
Do you have time for one more question if there's one out there? No pressure.
When you're writing your books, sorry, thank you. When you're writing your books, do you have answers for things that we don't know the answers to? Like, do you make up things in your mind and to like give yourself an answer? Or do you just kind of live with the fact that you'll never know the answer yourself?
When I'm in the early creative stage, I just kind of let myself run wild. So like I'm like, oh, that's a cool image. Like I like a bunch of ants crawling over somebody, that's spooky. And then I will kind of retcon once I've written it out and it's kind of in its draft. Then I'll do the work of like retconning a lore or a headcanon reason. So almost every single weird thing in We Used to Live Here and in the Caretaker has at least one reason. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes I'll have like 2 or 3 lined up that I'm kind of like, okay, I could use this one, but this one might be better. And then there's a few things that would be like a very vague notion of what I know it might mean, but I haven't quite solidified it yet, but I'm confident enough to be like, I'll be able to figure that one out. And like, I think I'm always very honest about that because I think there's this idea that I had that like writers writing these things just knew every single thing that they're doing. And like that little moment where the person like gives that look and they've been setting that up for 6 seasons for this huge payoff. But it wasn't until I saw it was Vince Gilligan, Breaking Bad, he did a talk in Vancouver. And they like, they're obviously like great writers, like they know what they're doing craft wise, but like they would just kind of like do something and not know like there's a scene where a character buys a massive heavy machine gun from a guy at Denny's and he puts it and it's him looking at it in the trunk outside. Like he meets the guy in the Denny's, they go to the car, they look at this machine gun, it's like the cold open to the season, and then they close the trunk. And they didn't know what that was going to be used for. They're filming episodes, millions of dollars per episode, and they didn't know what that was going to be used for. And then there's like a big rivalry between 2 characters, and it was Giancarlo Esposito and another, I can't remember the other actor's name, but it also is pronounced Esposito. Everyone thinks it's Esposito, but it's Esposito. And another and it was just a weird look they had given each other in the scene that wasn't planned, it wasn't scripted, and they're like, oh, we can use that. And they created this entire backstory rivalry between these characters that spanned 12 seasons, because if you include Better Call Saul, of a show. And so him being that open and honest about it was like really, and I wouldn't do it to that level where I'm like, I'm like have millions of dollars writing the line. But yeah, like that was really inspiring and like was like, okay, you can kind of do some improvised, he calls it like improvised but somewhat structured jazz, where they have the bones of it, but then they're able to kind of play in that territory. You don't need to know everything to a T, but still be intentional at the end.
So we are at the close of the Q&A. I'm not sure if but either of you have any dramatic closing words for us?
No, I'm good. That becomes public speaking then.
I just want to say another thank you so much for coming to Winnipeg and making time to speak with all of us tonight. We really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you both so very much. Thanks to all of you for your attention, for being here tonight. We so rarely get touring horror novelists here in Winnipeg, so as it's one of my favorite genres to read, that's a particular treat to have you here. So thank you so much for making the time, Marcus. We will be moving along to the signing portion of the evening, so in just a moment we will transfer Mr. Kliewer from that chair to that chair. There'll be a moment of beautiful chaos while everybody gets in line right down here. Rest assured that it will calm down shortly. Please do feel free to get a copy of the book signed. If you haven't paid for it already, that's perfectly fine. We just gently ask that you please pay for the book before you visit the store. And I'll be wandering down the line to write your name on a Post-it note, which is not because we don't trust you to spell your name, but it ensures you can spend more time chatting when you get to the table rather than spelling. So again, huge thanks to Atria Books, to 1201, to Simon & Schuster Canada, to Emily Bestler for making this book a reality. I'm going to ask you to join me in 2 rounds of applause. The first is for our host, Joanna Graham. And the second, of course, for Marcus Kliewer.
Thank you all for coming tonight. Oh, are pictures allowed?
The pictures are absolutely.
Okay, cool.
So if you would like pictures, please just have your cell phones out and ready to go. I'll be stumbling around if you need somebody to actually take the pictures as well. Just know that I know nothing about technology, so I will have to. Thank you again.